Welcome to the Best Ever PC Benchmark channel. Today, we're taking the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3090 and pairing it with the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X 3D to tackle Call of Duty Warzone Season 5. We'll be putting this combo through its paces at 1080p and 1440p using extreme, balanced, and minimum settings. Everything is captured using CapFrame X with real-time overlays from RivaTuner to ensure rock-solid accuracy. And hey, over 96% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. Let's flip that. We're gunning for 1,000 subscribers. If you like clean, deep dive benchmarking with no fluff, hit that like button, leave a comment, and smash that sub button. It helps more than you know. Alright, let's deploy. We're starting off at 1080p, native resolution, and no upscaling or frame generation, just raw GPU power. Even in this ultra-competitive game, the RTX 3090 still holds its ground with grace. Extreme settings. At Extreme, the visuals are absolutely top tier, reflections are precise, textures are razor sharp, and the world feels richly detailed. We're averaging 140 FPS, with 1% lows dipping to around 90 FPS. Even in chaotic city drops or dense foliage zones, the card maintains composure. It's not just pretty, it's playable. If you're playing casually and want to enjoy the best Warzone can look at 1080p, this setting is more than viable on a 3090. Balanced settings. Drop the settings to balanced, and we see a healthy performance bump. The game still looks great, textures remain clean, and post-processing effects are intact, but with less GPU load. Here we're hitting around 180 FPS on average, with 1% lows at 140 FPS. This is where performance really starts to shine for higher refresh rate monitors. You retain a good deal of visual fidelity while the game feels noticeably snappier. A strong middle ground. Minimum settings. Now we hit competitive territory. At minimum, the 3090 stretches its legs. We're pulling an average of 200 FPS, with 1% lows hanging at 150 FPS. The drop in fidelity is minor. Some shadows and post-processing are scaled back, but in motion, especially during fast-paced engagements, the fluidity is unmatched. This is the sweet spot for anyone who plays Warzone seriously. No stutter, no distractions, just clean, consistent performance. Whether you prioritize visuals or frame rate, at 1080p, the 3090 gives you options. But for pure competitive advantage, minimum settings with these frame rates are hard to ignore. Moving up to 1440p, the visual sharpness improves dramatically, but the GPU has to work harder. Warzone's massive maps and detailed assets push the RTX 3090 further, but it still handles the load impressively. Extreme settings. At Extreme, you're getting the full cinematic Warzone experience. Rich shadows, high draw distances, pristine textures, and all the post-processing bells and whistles. We're averaging 90 FPS, with 1% lows around 60 FPS. While it's still smooth, you may notice slight dips during airdrops, smoke spam, or clustered engagements. This isn't the setting for competitive edge, but for content creators or anyone prioritizing fidelity, it looks incredible. Balanced settings. Dialing back to balanced gives us some much-needed breathing room. Visuals remain impressive, draw distances are still strong, and most details hold up well. We're looking at 130 FPS on average, with 1% lows around 100 FPS. That extra 20+ frames helps a lot in fast firefights and dense urban environments. It's the kind of setting that lets you enjoy the beauty of Warzone without compromising on responsiveness. A great choice for those wanting a fluid experience without going full potato on visuals. Minimum settings. At minimum, we lean into speed and the 3090 delivers. Expect 140 FPS on average, with 1% lows hovering at 100 FPS. The visuals take a slight hit, fewer environmental effects, simpler lighting, but in return, the game feels razor sharp. Tracking, aiming, and movement all benefit from the smoother response. For competitive play at 1440p, this is the setting to run. It nails that performance to clarity ratio and makes every frame count. Even at 1440p, the RTX 3090 refuses to tap out. Whether you want full immersion or raw frame rate, this GPU still gives you room to choose. Let's lock the settings to extreme and run through every major upscaler at 1080p. No frame generation here, just pure upscaling performance. The RTX 3090 holds strong across the board, but some solutions stand out more than others. DLSS quality delivers the best overall experience. With an average of 160 FPS and 1% lows at 90, it's not just fast, it's crisp. The image quality is excellent, especially in motion, where DLSS's temporal reconstruction pays off. This is the go-to for players who want both fidelity and frame rate without compromise. DLAA, on the other hand, trades frames for superior anti-aliasing. We see an average of 120 FPS with 1% lows around 80. Visuals are noticeably cleaner, but it's heavier on the GPU. Still, if you want Warzone to look pristine and don't need sky-high frames, DLAA is a solid pick. FSR3 is next, averaging 160 FPS and dipping to 100 FPS on 1% lows. It's close to DLSS in raw numbers, but sharpness takes a slight hit, especially when sprinting or turning quickly. Still, it's more than good enough for anyone not on an RTX card. FSR1 gives us 170 FPS on average, 1% lows at 100. It performs well, but the visual downgrade is there. Edges can shimmer, and fine details get soft. It's fast, no doubt, but there's a trade-off. Fidelity FX, CAS Contrast Adaptive Sharpening averages 130 FPS, with 1% lows at 80 FPS. It's not a true upscaler, just a sharpener, but it holds up. If you're running native resolution and want to retain clarity without a full render technique, KS is useful. XESS clocks in with an average of 140 FPS and 1% lows at 90. Performance is solid and image quality is close to DLSS. It still struggles occasionally with ghosting behind fast-moving objects, but overall it's impressive. NIS or NVIDIA image scaling holds a similar line, 160 FPS average, 100 FPS on the 1% lows. Sharpness is good and it's extremely lightweight. It's a strong option if you're trying to squeeze out extra performance with minimal sacrifice. Overall, upscaler performance at 1080p Extreme is remarkably tight. DLSS and XESS lead in clarity, while FSR3 and NIS offer solid results for non-RTX users. You can pick based on preference and still get great responsiveness either way. At 1440p, with extreme settings, the GPU starts working harder, but the RTX 3090 is far from out of breath. We've kept frame generation off and let each upscaler prove its worth. The differences here are more noticeable, especially in motion clarity and sharpness. DLSS quality leads the pack with an average of 110 FPS and 1% lows at 60. The frame rate is excellent, and image quality stays razor sharp, especially in complex scenes like heavy firefights or fast traversal. DLSS's reconstruction really shines at 1440p, delivering detail that's nearly indistinguishable from native. DLLA continues to be the premium option for visual fidelity, but at a cost. You're looking at 90 FPS average with 50 FPS on the 1% lows. It's definitely playable, but slower than the other options. Still, if you prioritize clean edges and top-tier image quality without needing ultra-high frame rates, it's a compelling pick. FSR3 holds up well with an average of 120 FPS and 70 on the 1% lows. It's competitive with DLSS in raw performance, but the image can soften during fast movement. For non-RTX users though, it remains one of the best modern upscalers available. FSR1 shows its age a little but still delivers numbers. 120 FPS average, 1% lows at 60 FPS. Performance is high, but visual clarity takes a step back. Edges look rougher, and distant textures don't hold up under scrutiny. Still, it gets the job done if speed is your only priority. Fidelity FX, CAS, even though it's not a full upscaler, holds surprisingly well with 90 FPS on average and 50 FPS 1% lows. The sharpening pass helps maintain contrast and definition, though not at the level of DLSS or FSR3. It's lightweight and punchy, great for quick wins. XESS lands near the top with 100 FPS average and 60 FPS on the lows. It's a good alternative to DLSS with solid sharpness and relatively low artifacts. Occasionally it can ghost in high contrast motion, but overall it delivers great results, especially for Intel GPU users or those looking to stay platform agnostic. NIS, NVIDIA's image scaling, brings in 130 FPS average, 70 FPS 1% lows. Simple, effective, and consistent. While image reconstruction isn't as sophisticated, the performance uplift is strong and input latency stays low. Bottom line, DLSS continues to dominate in both sharpness and stability, especially at 1440p, where resolution reconstruction really matters. But every upscaler shown here is viable, depending on your priorities. If you're chasing raw FPS, FSR1, NIS, or CAS have you covered. If you want a balanced visual experience, stick to DLSS or XESS. Now it's time to check out AMD's frame generation. No upscalers, just pure frame interpolation over native resolution at extreme settings. While FSRFG isn't as seamless as DLSS 3, it still delivers a sizable frame rate bump for those who want more fluidity in less demanding gameplay modes. At 1080p, FSR FrameGen lifts the average frame rate to 190 FPS, with 1% lows sitting at 140 FPS. That's a notable jump over the native run without FG. The experience feels incredibly fluid, especially in less chaotic moments like tactical repositioning or rooftop sniping. Even during fast strafes or rotations, frame delivery stays consistent. However, if you're ultra-sensitive to input timing, say during intense close-quarters duels, you might feel a slight shift in responsiveness compared to a native-only run. At 1440p, FrameGen pushes us to 140 FPS on average, with 1% lows dropping to 90 FPS. That's still a very comfortable performance window and a marked upgrade over native rendering alone. Frame pacing remains stable with minimal hitching or oddities in animation, though, like at 1080p, the added latency makes it better suited for campaign, DMZ, or casual squad play rather than sweaty ranked matches. Overall, FSR frame generation is a great tool if you're looking to boost FPS without sacrificing native rendering sharpness. It's not the top pick for reflex-driven gunfights, but for smoother visuals and cinematic pacing, it does the job well, especially on hardware that can already push high native frames, like the RTX 3090. Is the RTX 3090 enough for Warzone Season 5? Look, Warzone Season 5 is well optimized, and the RTX 3090 remains a heavy hitter. Whether you're playing at 1080p or 1440p, with or without upscalers, the 3090 consistently delivers triple-digit frame rates. You don't need a 4090 or a 5090 to enjoy Warzone. Unless you're aiming for ultra-high refresh at 4K, this GPU still has plenty of life left. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment with the next game you want tested, and help us hit our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay sharp, stay fast, and stay subscribed.